Hi, thanks for being in a new video. I had the opportunity to try out for a day the Galaxy Z Fold6, so I wanted to take some pictures and compare in some cases how the Galaxy Z Fold5, which is the last generation, came out. So join me as I take a look at more or less these pictures and videos that I was able to capture with this device. Let's get started. Notice, here we have the ultra-wide camera to start with. It looks to me like it's got a good result, a good level of detail, but obviously nothing earth-shattering. If you wanted to get too detailed and try to zoom in, you'll notice that it doesn't have as much detail as I say. Remember, it's not a high-resolution sensor, so you can't choose some mode that gives you more detail. Unlike other current high-end devices that are starting to incorporate high-resolution sensors, not only in the main camera, but also in the ultra-wide camera. Now this is the result with the main camera. One thing I noticed with this main camera is that on the edges and not just the corners, we're going to see a little bit of blur, something that is quite strange in the main camera. It is a 23mm camera, it seems to me, and as you can see, again, we are not going to find an exaggeratedly high level of detail in the automatic mode. Although in this case I could have used the 50 megapixel mode, but I forgot. Now you're looking at the telephoto camera picture. We are talking about 3x optical zoom, and I find the result is nice. Note especially this part of the grating as it is well defined. Let's just remember the distance from which we are, and if you want to notice the ultra wide perspective, we are definitely quite far away from that area. And now let's start with digital zoom. In this case, we're talking about 10x digital zoom, where I consider it still has a good quality, but obviously compared to other high-end devices, it falls short. The most it lets us get is 30x, and I'm not saying it's a bad zoom, but talking about the most expensive device that Samsung has today, it definitely leaves a lot to be desired. Especially if you compare it against the S24 Ultra, which will have a completely superior zoom. Here is another picture I took with the ultra-wide camera, and notice how it does generate quite a bit of noise, even in the edge area, even in the shadow area. Definitely not such an advanced photograph in this regard. In this case, it was already starting at dusk, so there wasn't as much light as if it were midday, but overall I think there was enough light to have a better result. Now let's take a quick look at a comparison between the last generation and the current one. On the left, you're looking at the result with the Galaxy Z Fold5, and on the right, the result with the Galaxy Z Fold6. And as you can see, the area at the bottom comes out quite a bit more out of focus in this new generation for some strange reason. And with respect to the brighter area, I think it does get to handle a little bit better, especially the noise, because it's a little bit cleaner picture. In that sense, I think we have had a little bit more quality in this new generation, but there doesn't really seem to be too much evolution. One thing that is noticeable is that the color rendition changes completely, in this case opting for a slightly warmer tone. Although in fact there was quite warm lighting at that time, so it is only a difference that I noticed. Now this is a 10x zoom photograph. We're indoors, remember, so there's not too much lighting. And the truth is, I'd like to know your opinion as to which is a better photograph from your point of view. Honestly, I think the Galaxy Z Fold5's camera does a better job than the Z Fold6. If I go to the closer details in this 10x zoom photograph, and at the 30x maximum, again, it looks a little better defined on the Z Fold5 camera and a little cleaner photograph. Although it does get to overexpose quite a bit in several of the areas of the photograph, whereas the new generation comes out better exposed, but with more noise and in general, I think less defined details. And the last comparison I made was this area where the lighting was. Note that the last generation seems to me to expose slightly better the most illuminated areas so that they come out a little less overexposed. Although it is also true that the new generation takes slightly cleaner pictures in terms of noise handling. I also took a night photograph to see more or less what the performance is, and the truth is that in some things I liked it better than the last generation, and in other things I did not. For example, the color seems to me to be much more accurate in the new generation. Notice that the Olympic rings, for example, are in white as they should be, while last generation came out a bit blue. Also, the yellow of the tower lighting is much more natural, but note that in this area there were several parts where the photo is overexposed and looks completely white, whereas the last generation did a better job in that regard. He even notes that the darker area comes out better defined in the last gen, whereas in the current generation there seems to be less definition in this part. Exactly the same thing will happen when we use the telephoto camera. So it seems that it is indeed an algorithm issue that can be corrected so that the camera behaves differently. But let's look at other pictures. This one I took with the camera on this device. This one is also with the camera of this device, and note that the level of detail is good, but honestly nothing spectacular. Lately we have seen other devices that through software try to optimize the details much more, but in this case it is a simple photo. The video recording with the ultra-wide camera seems to me to be of good quality. The novelty is that now you can record at 60 frames per second with this camera, but if you record at 60 frames per second when you zoom in, it won't let you switch to the main camera and has a 2x limit. So if you want to switch to the main camera, you must have video recording. Obviously, the main camera also allows us to record in 4K at 60 frames per second. The truth is that in this sense, Samsung does a very good job. It is possibly one of the best in the Android world in terms of video recording. Interestingly, the telephoto camera can also record at 60 frames per second, but you can't switch between the three cameras if you record at this quality. So in order to switch between the three lenses, you need to use the maximum setting at 4K at 30 frames per second. In that case, it will let you switch between all three lenses. And watch, this would be the maximum zoom. Again, as I say, it can be very short in terms of sharpness, though short in terms of definition, although fortunately it has a very good stabilization. And look at this would be the full range of your camera at different focal lengths so that you have more or less an idea of how your pictures would come out from different distances. Again, I insist, sincerely not bad zoom at all, but considering that it is an exaggeratedly expensive device, we would definitely like an even more attractive result, especially at maximum zoom. And finally, we have a portrait photograph. Notice that even in the smallest gaps, it did a good job, although it's a picture with a bit more noise than we'd like. So it's not going to offer us such an exaggerated level of detail, but talking specifically about edge detection, we definitely do have a good result. But I insist, this is just a small first look. Let me know in the comments what you think of the photo update. I personally hope Samsung releases an update because it really doesn't seem to be taking advantage of their new photography engine that they are supposed to be debuting. And honestly, I'm afraid they'll do the same thing they did with the Galaxy S24 Ultra, that we're still waiting for the update that's supposed to fix all the camera performance. I would hate for it to take 7 or 8 months for them to finally release an update that is going to improve the photographic performance. It's really something that's been bothering me a lot lately from Samsung. I hope they do something to correct this, because the fact of keeping the same resolution and the same aperture in the three cameras from the Galaxy Z Fold 4 was something that bothered me a lot. But I had a little hope that with the software they would do a much better job. But in reality, it is still a very similar or even inferior result. A very similar or even inferior result. But when we already have this device in our hands for more time to do unboxing, review and everything else, let's see if it comes a bit more optimized. Remember that this unit I tested was a unit that we borrowed on launch day and probably doesn't have the final software yet. Let's hope that's the case, because at least right off the bat it leaves me with a bad feeling. I hope you liked this video. If you did, you know you can let me know, and I'll see you next time.